My new neighbor keeps a 14-year-old golden retriever locked in a crate in front of his living room window, and I've timed it. He doesn't let him out for a minimum of 12 hours a day. I've called animal control and they won't do anything. So now I have a pair of bolt cutters in my Amazon cart, and I need you to tell me if I'm about to be a hero or just a guy who's about to get arrested for stealing a sick dog. Let me back up. My name is Tom. I'm 42, a graphic designer, and I bought this house in a quiet, leafy suburb 3 months ago for the most cliché of reasons. I wanted a yard for my dog, a boisterous 3-year-old rescue mutt named Gus. I work from home, which means I have a front row seat to the daily lives of my neighbors. Most of them are fine. There's the retired couple across the street who wave every single time I check the mail, the young family to my left with kids who shriek like mandrakes, and then there's Bill. Bill lives in the gray-shingled colonial next door. He's maybe in his late 50s, with a permanent scowl etched into a face that looks like it's been weathered by 1,000 storms. The first time I saw him, he was hauling a massive duffel bag out of a semi-truck parked on the street. He grunted a hey in my direction without making eye contact and disappeared inside. Not exactly the welcome wagon type, but fine. I'm not here to make best friends. It was a few days later that I first saw the dog. I was at my desk, which faces the street, wrestling with a particularly obnoxious client's logo design, when I noticed him. An old golden retriever, his muzzle gone completely white, was sitting patiently inside a large wire crate positioned directly in front of the living room window. He was a beautiful dog, the kind of noble, gentle old soul you see in movies. He just sat there, watching the world go by. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe Bill was just running errands. But hours passed. The sun arced across the sky, casting long shadows across our manicured lawns. Gus whined for his afternoon walk. We came back. The golden retriever was still there. He'd shifted from sitting to lying down, his head resting on his paws. My stomach started to feel tight. I've had dogs my whole life. I know they sleep a lot, especially older ones, but this felt different. By the time evening fell and Bill's living room lights flickered on, the dog hadn't moved from the crate. Around 8 p.m., Bill's hulking silhouette appeared. He opened the crate, clipped a leash on the old dog, and led him out the front door. The dog moved stiffly, his back legs a little shaky. He did his business on a small patch of grass, and within 5 minutes they were back inside. The dog was back in the crate. The lights went out. I told myself it was a one-off. Maybe Bill had a long day. Maybe the dog was recovering from surgery and needed to be confined. I made excuses for him because the alternative felt too ugly. But it wasn't a one-off. It was a routine. A brutal, relentless routine. Every morning, around 6 a.m., Bill would let the dog out for a few minutes before disappearing in his truck. And for the next 12, sometimes 14 hours, the dog would remain in that crate. A prisoner in his own home. I started keeping a log, like some crazed private investigator. 8:15 a.m. Dog placed in crate. 3:00 p.m. Dog has not moved. 7:45 p.m. Bill returns. 7:51 p.m. Dog let out. 7:58 p.m. Dog back in crate. The rage started as a low simmer and quickly grew to a rolling boil. I work from home. I see this dog all day. I see him panting when the afternoon sun hits the window just right. I see him staring, his cloudy eyes following a squirrel or a passing car with a longing that feels almost human. He never barks, never whines. He just endures. It's the silence that's killing me. The quiet, stoic suffering. After 2 weeks of this, I decided I had to do something. I caught Bill as he was getting out of his truck one evening. I put on my friendliest neighborly smile and walked over, Gus trotting happily beside me. "Hey there," I said, offering a hand. "I'm Tom, your new neighbor." Bill looked at my hand like it was a foreign object before reluctantly giving it a brief, crushing shake. "Bill," he grunted. "Just wanted to introduce myself." "That's a beautiful golden you've got," I said, trying to sound casual. "What's his name?" Bill's eyes narrowed. "Buddy." "Old feller, huh?" "My last dog was a golden. Best dogs in the world." I took a breath. I couldn't help but notice he spends a lot of time in his crate. "Is he doing okay?" The change was instantaneous. The gruff exterior hardened into something granite-like. "My dog is my business," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Not yours." "I'm not trying to pry," I said, holding my hands up defensively. "It's just, it seems like a long time for a dog to be cooped up, especially an older one." He took a step closer, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of actual fear. Bill was a big guy, with calloused hands and a palpable aura of coiled anger. "You watch your house, I'll watch mine. Got it?" He turned and stalked into his house, slamming the door behind him. The message was clear: back off. Of course, I didn't. The confrontation only solidified my resolve. I saw a dog in distress and an owner who was at best a callous jerk. The next day, I called animal control. I explained the situation calmly and rationally, giving them the log I'd kept. The woman on the phone sounded bored. "Sir, does the dog have food and water?" "I can't see a bowl from here, but I assume so." "Does the dog appear to be in immediate physical danger? Is it emaciated? Does it have open sores?" "No, but he's old and stiff, and he's locked up all day. It's cruel." "Sir," she said with a sigh that I could feel through the phone, "as long as the animal has shelter, access to food and water, and is not being physically beaten, craking is not illegal. We can send an officer to do a wellness check, but if the owner doesn't let them in, there's not much we can do without a warrant." 2 days later, I saw an animal control van pull up. A uniformed officer walked to Bill's door. They spoke for less than 2 minutes. Bill stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head. The officer shrugged, got back in her van, and drove away. Nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. The next morning, Bill had partially closed the blinds on his living room window, so I could only see a sliver of the crate. He knew I was watching. The bastard knew. That's when the darker thoughts started creeping in. What if I just took him? The idea felt insane, a line I never thought I'd cross. I'm a graphic designer who spends his days arguing about fonts. I'm not a criminal. But every time I looked out my window and saw that sliver of the crate, the idea grew stronger. I started to notice Buddy's decline more clearly. Some days he wouldn't even lift his head when Bill came home. His movements became slower, more pained. One afternoon, I saw him struggling to stand up in the crate, his back legs trembling violently before he collapsed back onto the thin mat. My heart shattered. I was watching this dog die in slow motion. My nights became consumed by a mix of fury and helplessness. I'd be lying in bed, imagining Buddy lying in that crate, joints aching, needing to relieve himself, just waiting. Waiting for a master who saw him as an inconvenience. Gus would be curled up at the foot of my bed, snoring softly, a picture of canine contentment. The contrast was a knife in my gut. I found online forums for animal rescue activists. I read stories of people who had liberated dogs from abusive situations. They were hailed as heroes. But I also read the legal statutes for theft, for breaking and entering. In the eyes of the law, Buddy wasn't a suffering creature, he was Bill's property. Stealing him would be the same as stealing his television. That's when I put the bolt cutters in my Amazon cart. They sat there for a week, a digital icon representing a terrible choice. I'd open the app, stare at them, my thumb hovering over the Buy Now button. Was I really considering this? Committing a felony over a dog that wasn't mine? What if I got caught? I'd lose my business, my house. My life would be ruined. But what if I did nothing? Could I live with myself, knowing I stood by while that poor old dog suffered until his last breath? The breaking point came on a Tuesday. It was raining, a cold, miserable downpour that had been going on for days. Bill had been gone since early morning, his semi-truck absent from its usual spot. That meant he was on a long haul. He'd be gone for at least 2 days, maybe 3. And Buddy was in the crate. All day Tuesday, he sat there. All night. On Wednesday morning, my stomach was in knots. Bill wasn't back. I stared at the house, a growing dread creeping into my veins. Who was taking care of the dog? I called animal control again. I think my neighbor has abandoned his dog, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. He's been locked in a crate for over 24 hours, and the owner is gone. They gave me the same spiel. We can send an officer, but if no one is home, can't you get a warrant? The dog could die. Sir, we have to follow procedure. Procedure. Buddy could be dehydrated, starving, lying in his own filth, and they had to follow procedure. That's when I knew. No one was coming to save him. No one but me. That night I clicked Buy Now, with 1-day shipping. The bolt cutters arrived in a ridiculously oversized Amazon box. Holding them, I felt a surge of adrenaline that was both terrifying and intoxicating. They were heavy, solid, a tool for breaking rules. My plan was simple and probably stupid. Bill's house had a small, fenced-in backyard. The back door had a simple lock that looked like it could be forced. I'd wait until after midnight, cut the lock on the back gate, break in, get Buddy, and bring him to a friend's house an hour away, a friend who ran an unofficial dog rescue and would know what to do without asking too many questions. The night was moonless and quiet. Every creak of my own house sounded like a gunshot. Gus seemed to sense my anxiety, following me from room to room with a worried look in his eyes. I dressed in dark clothes, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break them. I was about to become a burglar, a dawn napper. At 2 a.m., I slipped out my back door, the cold steel of the bolt cutters in my gloved hand. The air was cold and damp, smelling of wet earth. I crept along the side of my house, using the shadows as cover. Bill's back gate was a cheap chain-link fence with a padlock that looked like it came from a dollar store. I positioned the jaws of the cutters around the shackle. It took more effort than I expected. I had to put my whole body into it, gritting my teeth as the metal groaned in protest. Then, with a loud snap, the lock broke. The noise echoed in the silent night. I froze, waiting for lights to flash on, for a shout from a window. Nothing. My heart was a hummingbird in my chest. I slipped through the gate and crept to the back door. Peering through the window, I could see into the dark kitchen. I took out a pry bar I'd bought along with the cutters. I'd really thought this through, hadn't I, and wedged it into the doorframe. I felt like a terrible actor in a low-budget crime movie. I put my weight against it, and with a sickening, splintering sound, the wood gave way. The door swung open. I was in. The house was silent and smelled stale, a mixture of old coffee and something vaguely medicinal. I used the dim light from my phone to navigate through the kitchen and into the living room. And there he was. Buddy was lying in his crate, just as I'd seen him 1,000 times through the window. But up close, it was so much worse. The crate was too small for a dog his size, and the thin mat inside was soiled. There was a water dispenser clipped to the side, but it was empty. A bowl of dry kibble sat untouched. He lifted his head slowly, his old eyes blinking in the phone's light. He didn't bark. He just watched me, with a look of profound weariness that cut right through me. "Hey, boy," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "It's okay. I'm here to get you out." The crate was latched, but not locked. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the clasp. I swung the wire door open. "Come on, buddy. You're free." He didn't move. He just lay there, looking at me. I realized he probably couldn't get up on his own. I reached in, my hands sinking into his matted, dirty fur. He was all bones. So thin. I gently looped one arm under his chest and another under his hind legs. He let out a soft groan of pain, but he didn't resist. He was surprisingly light. I lifted him out of his prison, and his head rested against my shoulder. I could feel the slow, faint rhythm of his breathing. I held him for a moment in the darkness, a wave of pure, unadulterated love and relief washing over me. I had done it. He was safe. That's when the lights flicked on. "What the hell do you think you're doing in my house?" I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. Bill was standing in the hallway, his face a mask of disbelief and incandescent rage. He wasn't on a long haul. His truck must have been in for repairs. In his hand, he was holding a tire iron. I was frozen, still clutching his dog. My mind raced, trying to form an explanation, an excuse, anything. "I thought you'd abandoned him," I stammered, the words sounding pathetic even to my own ears. The water was empty. "He hasn't been out in 2 days." "Put my dog down," Bill said, his voice dangerously quiet. He took a step forward. "He's sick, Bill. He needs a vet. Look at him." I pleaded, gesturing with my head toward the frail animal in my arms. I said, "Put him down. Now." Slowly, carefully, I lowered Buddy to the floor. The old dog stumbled and then collapsed onto the rug, too weak to stand. Bill's eyes never left me, but his face began to crumble. The rage was still there, but now it was shot through with something else. A deep, gut-wrenching grief. "You have no idea," he rasped, his voice cracking. "You have no idea what you've just done." He gestured around the sparsely furnished room. It was then that I noticed the pictures. On the mantel, on the end tables, were dozens of photos of a smiling woman. A woman with Bill, both of them looking younger, happier. In almost every picture, there was a golden retriever. A younger, vibrant Buddy. "That's my wife, Helen," Bill said, his voice thick. "She died 6 months ago. Cancer. It was fast." I stood there, speechless. The bolt cutters, the broken door, the self-righteous fury, it all felt like a sick joke. This house, this truck, it's all I have left. I'm barely keeping my head above water. I drive 80 hours a week just to pay the mortgage and her medical bills. He looked down at the dog, and his expression softened into pure anguish. Buddy was her dog. He was with her when she at the end. He's all I have left of her. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The long hours away. The neglect that wasn't born of malice, but of desperation. I know he's old, Bill said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The vet said it's his hips. And his kidneys are failing. He's in pain. There's nothing they can do. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. I crate him because when I'm gone, he sometimes falls and he can't get up. He just lies there for hours. I found him like that once. In the crate, I know he's safe. He can't hurt himself. My own eyes started to burn. The empty water bottle, the untouched food, it wasn't neglect. The old dog was dying, and he had probably stopped eating and drinking. The appointment is for Friday, Bill said, his voice barely audible. To put him to sleep. I just needed one more trip to pay for it. I just wanted a few more days with him. He's my last link to her. The room was silent, save for Buddy's shallow breathing. I had seen a simple, black and white case of animal abuse. But I was colorblind. The situation was a universe of grayscale I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I hadn't seen a villain, I'd seen a man drowning in grief, trying to hold onto the last living piece of his world, even if it meant holding on too tight. I looked at the broken door, the frail dog on the floor, and the broken man standing before me. I hadn't rescued anyone. I had just trespassed into a stranger's private hell and judged him for how he was surviving it. I broke into his home, violated his sanctuary, and was about to steal the one thing that connected him to the memory of his dead wife. So I need you to tell me. I know I broke the law. I know I made 1,000 assumptions. But looking at that sweet old dog, I still have to ask, am I the asshole? Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.